So very quickly, a deck of cards is given to somebody else and it's shuffled. And we can verify that everything has been shuffled up, that all the cards are different. Everywhere you look, there's a different card, and I don't know what the identity of the cards are. And I could have the spectator perhaps make a cut on the deck to make a selection. And I'm going to hold that break there and just recap very quickly. The cards were shuffled. They were all in different places. But you made a cut to a place, and we've held the break that you created. And I'm going to write down a prediction of what card I think you have selected. Or I might reach into my pocket and pull out a piece of paper and put it in plain sight. Or I might have just had a piece of paper in an envelope sitting there the whole time while I did this trick, sitting out and open. And that prediction, whatever it is going to say the Jack of Spades. It might have a J and an S for Jack of Spades, or it might say the Jack of Spades, or it might say you will pick the Jack of Spades, or I predict the Jack, whatever. You've made a prediction in a number of different ways we could have revealed it. I could have had the prediction set ahead of time. I could write the prediction before they select the card. I could write the prediction after they've cut the card. I could do any one of those things, but I have some kind of a prediction. I might even say out loud, I predict that you have cut to the Jack of Spades. And then I lift up the top half and I demonstrate that indeed they did select the Jack of Spades. This is a revelation. And what I gave you there was about 5 or 6 different revelations that you can use when you force a card. So when you force a card, that is, you've predetermined a card that a spectator is going to choose, and we talked about forces already, you can have any kind of revelation that you want. And if you think about it, you could have the trick operating off of the same force, and you could do 5 different tricks using that same method. And that's because the revelation is always different. Okay? So it would be like if I walked into a house and I looked in the living room, looked different from the house next door, and from the house down the street from there, and from the house up the street. All these living rooms look different when I open up the door and I look inside. But if I walk in and I get to the kitchen, I find that all of them have the exact same kitchen, if that makes sense. Okay, so all of these houses have the same kitchen, and that kind of represents that all of the tricks are using the same method, the same force. But the revelation, what I see when I open the front door, looks very different from house to house to house. And that is the revelation of the trick. So I can use one method, that is the force, and I can have a number of different tricks. So these are all revelations. Those are revelations that are predictions based on a force. Now, you could have any other kind of a revelation based on any one of the other methods. You might have a peak. And then that peak is then forced on them, and that means that you did not predetermine what the card was going to be, which means I couldn't have written down ahead of time what my prediction was going to be. I only know my prediction at the moment that I've peeked the card. The other one is using a key card. So, for example, if I demonstrate that the cards are all shuffled up, and I don't know what any of the cards are because you shuffled the deck, I want you to just select a card now out of that shuffled deck, and they would select that card just like that, and then I would say, go ahead, and we're going to have you place the card back into the center of the deck there. We're going to lose it inside. Okay, and then I say, look, I can look through this deck all day long, and there's no way that I would know what your card is. I have no idea what your card is, but I bet you I can figure it out. I'm going to just say a few things to you, and I don't want you to respond at all. I'm going to say to you, black, red, black, red, black, red. Ah, I can see just by the look in your eye that it's a black card. See, I don't know what it is. I have no idea. I have no idea inside the deck what your card could be. I have no clue. The deck was shuffled, and you picked freely. I don't know what it is, but I know it's a black card. I'm going to say something else. Clubs, spades, clubs, spades, clubs, spades, clubs, spades, 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 spades. It's a spade. So your card, I think, based on what you're showing me right now, that your card is a spade. Now I'm going to say something else here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, Jack, Queen, King. Let me do it again really fast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see something. I see something. Let me do it again. Now, don't do anything. Try to stay as still as possible as I watch you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I see it. 4 of spades. Your card is the 4 of spades. Okay, now what I did is I used a key card. I knew the jack of spades was on top. I shuffled it to the bottom, and then I used that key card to identify the card next to it, which was a free selection, the 4 of spades. So you can use the method to help you determine what your revelation is going to be. Since I didn't know what my choice was going to be until the moment it was done, and until I looked through the deck to see it, that doesn't mean that I have to use my key card to just do this. I know that your card is the 4 of spades, right? I can use my key card to just help me understand the identity of the card, and then I can reveal it in any way that I choose now that I know the identity. I could write it down on a prediction at that point and seal it up and put it aside. I could do this idea here where I'm saying things to the spectator and I guess what their card is going to be, right? And that's a good presentation. So presentation is very, very important in your revelation. In fact, I have a whole section here I'm going to talk about dealing with presentation. So there are some various revelations that you can think about, and you can think about revealing a card any way that you want. If I have a predetermined card that I know that I'm going to force, if I have a duplicate of that card, I could have the duplicate of that card sitting somewhere, maybe underneath a table mat, or sitting inside of a cup, or, inside of a jar, or I could have it sitting, across the room, and I can say, well, I think your card has jumped from the pack all the way over here, and I can go over to that item and take the card out and show them that their card has moved. And that's not even a prediction of any kind. That's what we call a card to an impossible location. So that's a totally different revelation. I didn't really figure out what their card was. What I did is I made their selection do something. I made it move to another location, and I used a second version of that card, a duplicate of that card, to do it. So a force can get you to many, many different kinds of revelations, and a key card can do the same thing too. So the key here is for you to think about, based on your methods of understanding what a selected card is, forces and key cards, come up with many different ways that you can reveal that in the end. You can have one method, and you can have 10 different tricks that you do with that one method. So that is revelations in a nutshell, how you reveal cards. The next thing we're going to talk about is presentation. Presentation is a very difficult topic to talk about with young people. And I want you to know that at the end of this, I'm actually going to show you a number of tricks. I'm going to put this together into a few different types of tricks, some tricks beginning to end that you can learn and then practice on your own using these different ideas. But ultimately, what I want you to know is different elements that help you put tricks together so that you can go make your own tricks. You can come up with your own kinds of magic tricks that are unique to you, just like any professional magician would, using very simple methods that are accessible to you in the state that you're in right now as a young person. So with that, let's talk quickly about presentation. Okay, as I was kind of alluding to at the beginning of all of this, presentation for a young person is very difficult when doing magic tricks and card tricks. Now, because you're a young person and you don't have credibility, and that is sort of an authority about what you're doing, that makes presentation very hard. It's very hard for a young person to do what we call mentalism tricks. That is the kind of mind-reading kinds of tricks, right? Nobody's going to take a kid seriously doing things like that. And quite frankly, you have a hard enough time taking adults seriously doing things like that. So as a young person, you're going to have a credibility issue in your presentation. So that is a problem that we have to work around. That also means that it's going to be difficult you to do tricks in the way that you see a lot of adults do them. A lot of adults will have kind of stories that go along with tricks. We call this patter. It's some kind of a script that they recite as they're doing a trick. And as a young person, because it's hard to take young people seriously, it's hard for adults to really follow them on those scripts. And it's hard for your peers, other young people that you're going to perform for your friends, to follow that. Also, as a young person with other friends who are also young people are rude to each other. They get in each other's business and they get in the way and they try to mess you up, and that's a whole other problem. So we need to deal with that. I want to try to help you understand ways to deal with that problem in presentation. The fact that a lot of the people you'll be performing for are going to be young people as well, and they're not always nice about what you're doing. Even your very best friends are going to try to kind of trip you up here from time to time when you're doing tricks. So these are things that are very difficult to deal with. So here's some pieces of advice I have for you. Number one, as you are presenting, it's probably a good idea just simply to present what you are doing as you are doing it. So that means that you probably are better off not having some story that goes along with your trick, but rather just presenting what you're doing. Just say what you're doing as you're doing it, and let that be your presentation. A lot of professional magicians do that. In fact, there's a lot of professional magicians who don't say anything when they present. And that makes presenting very difficult, but in a way it also helps them, because if they're not saying anything, it's pretty hard for people to interrupt them and get in the way and to mess them up. So there are some magicians that present things just in absolute silence. Now, I don't suggest you do that, but it might be easier for you to just say what you're doing. So when you say, I need you to pick a card, say, I'm going to have you pick a card, and remember the deck was shuffled. So you've picked that card, and I want you to memorize what the identity of that card is, and then we're going to place the card back inside the deck, just like that, okay, and lose it. So there's no way that I could know where the card is at. I don't know what it is. I don't know where it is. There's just no way that I could know it. That is how I suggest you present your tricks. Just say what you're doing and keep it simple. For a couple of reasons. It means that you don't have to be thought of as cute. There's nothing more frustrating than being thought of as cute when you're trying to do something serious for somebody. You're telling a trick and that's kind of cute. Just say what you're doing, and then you don't have to worry about that problem. The other part of that is that it's very difficult as a young person to remember some things. You haven't really developed fully your brain, and you are going to have some difficulty memorizing things perfectly and repeating them perfectly and doing everything in the right order perfectly. If you are merely just saying what you're doing, then there's nothing there for you to remember. There's nothing for you to recall in terms of your presentation and your pattern. You just say what you're doing and keep it very simple. Say it slowly, and try to take up your time by describing what is going on in the trick. Okay? Another idea for you in presentation is that you can delay or misdirect. That is a misdirection. That is when we're doing something to keep people off balance so they don't realize what has happened or what is going on. You can delay and you can misdirect by recapping what you have already done. So first of all, you're talking about what you're doing as you're doing it. Please select a card. Please place the card back in the deck. I don't know where it's at. Now let me review what we've done. I had you select a card from a shuffled deck. I had you place the card back inside. This is all a review, and what it's doing is it's creating a delay and a misdirection for people to forget about how things happened. So I would strongly recommend that your best misdirection be recapping. Recapitulation, big word again. Reviewing what you've already done. Another way to misdirect is to use props. Props can be very helpful. I'm going to take a pen out of my pocket and we're going to tap the deck with a pen. Use props. I'm going to have you select a card, and I want the card to sit right over here. We're going to set a coin right on top of it so that we know that nobody's going to touch it. Do things like that. Now, there's no reason you would have to do that, but using props to help misdirect can be very useful for you, and it also gives you a great deal of delay. that you don't have to remember and rehearse and think very hard about. You're just going to do this thing. You're going to explain what you're doing as you're doing it, and it's going to give you a little bit more credibility in your magic trick, even though it doesn't do anything, using props to do stuff. Another idea here is to be ahead. To be ahead, because we're not doing a lot of really difficult sleights to make our card tricks work here. Be ahead. Using a force is a good way of being ahead. Using a force with a pre-created prediction is a good way of being ahead. Using a duplicate card that is hidden somewhere is a good way of being ahead. Be way ahead of everybody so that your trick becomes a little bit more foolproof. You can't really mess it up. It's already kind of done before you even started. And the last piece of advice is to use what we call surprise effects. In short, a surprise effect is when the performer tells the audience that one thing is going to happen, and the audience is waiting for that thing to happen, but instead something completely different happens as the effect. So therefore, the thing that actually happens is a surprise to everybody, and even though that thing that does happen is absolutely amazing, one of the reasons why it's probably effective is because no one expected it to happen. So we'll talk about that a little bit more later when we look at tricks. But this is another great way for a young person to go about performing magic, is to do a lot of surprise effects. Now, if you are doing only surprise effects, then people are really going to be paying close attention, and you don't want that either. So you want to have maybe one or two tricks that you do where there's a surprise outcome that serves as the very best misdirection that you can have. Because people are focused on one thing happening that you say is going to happen, and then something else happens. And that's just a really good way to present a trick that people find pretty astounding. So that is pretty much all I have to say on presentation, dealing with issues of credibility and types of misdirection and format. Next, what I want to do is I want to talk about tricks. So we're going to go through a series of tricks. I'll show you a few tricks. Then we'll talk about how they're put together. And this is just an example of the way that you can build your house, as we talked about at the beginning. The ways in which you can put together the different elements that we've talked about. Your techniques, your peaks, forces, or key cards, your revelations, and your presentation. The way that you can put all of these things together to get a number of different tricks while using kind of all the same principles.